Today's episode is sponsored by Penguin Random House South Africa, which is part of Penguin Random House, a Big Five publisher.
Penguin has some exciting titles available this month.
I've read one of them. Decima by Eben Venter is a beautiful fable that attempts to inhabit the consciousness of a rhinoceros. I read it as research for a book I'm writing. It's breathtaking.
Well, you know I love a good thriller, so I'm excited to read Character Scan by Douglas Kruger. It's about a woman who has the ability to detect corruption in others. Wouldn't that be a great superpower to have?
I don't know, Gail. In South Africa, that might be kind of dangerous.
I guess that's why Character Scan is a thriller.
Look out for Decima by Eben Venter and Character Scan by Douglas Kruger at all good bookstores. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hidden Lives of Writers. My name's Fiona Snyckers, and I'm talking to my co-host, Gail Schimmel. Hi, Gail. How's it going?
I'm good, Fiona. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How's your writing week been?
So, I've had an interesting week that it's given me some insight into writing on holiday.
Oh, right. Yes.
Because we've just had a patch where you, as you know, I write with Kate Sidley, we write as Katie Gail, and we write Cozy Mysteries. And we've just had a patch where we've both been away, one after the other. And I think we imagined that our writing process would carry on uninterrupted during this time.
Right.
And the reality is it hasn't. It's fallen apart completely. Okay. We haven't managed. Kate is the lead writer. She managed a bit while I was away, but while she's away, she can't manage it all. And when I was away, I didn't manage to do my part very efficiently. And I think it's been a lesson for me that maybe when you go on holiday, you have to go on holiday.
Yes.
But at the same time, having said that, for my own writing, when I'm on holiday, it's one of my best writing times. So maybe it's the difference between a joint writing project and a lone writing project. I don't know. I feel like there's a lesson in here somewhere, but I can't quite find it. How's your writing week been?
Yeah, well, this is interesting because in a way it ties in with what you were saying. I've been watching Kate's Facebook as she's been away, and she's been talking about being in the Cotswolds and doing research for the novels that you guys work on, the sort of English country village setting, seeing it with her own eyes, etc. And it's made me feel a little bit guilty about my research process, which normally involves entering search terms into Google.
Listen, Kate and I wrote 4 books set there before either of us set foot in the Cotswolds. So don't feel too guilty, but I'm very jealous of Kate now.
Yes, I'm also terribly jealous of her, even though I've been to the places she's talking about, but it was a long time ago. But I'm just interested in this. Being physically in a place and seeing these things with your own eyes as opposed to anybody else's eyes, does it enrich your work? Does it make a difference? Do you bring that home and does it give a kind of new energy to the work?
I think it's going to be such an interesting thing for Kate and I to watch going forward, how this trip feeds our work and feeds mostly obviously her work because it's going to be hard for it to feed my part of the work. But I think it's going to be very interesting. I'll report back to you.
You've mentioned that Kate has said before that she likes setting. She likes to put your characters in a different setting. She doesn't like to keep the narrative static. So maybe this will give it a new energy.
I've got a feeling we're going to have some bizarre settings because she went on this trip with the idea that they would follow any crazy idea that came to them. So they went to fetes and they went to dodgy pubs and had weird experiences. And she sent me a photo from the fete that looks like, we've set a book at a village fete and it looks exactly like I imagined it, but also with details that we could never have imagined. So I've got a feeling we're going to be seeing some unusual settings going forward.
Fantastic. I love it. Okay. So what have you been consuming in the way of narrative this week?
So I want to talk this week about less a particular book, but a general trend and see what you think. So it started last time when we spoke to James Hendry, and he's such a Renaissance man in a way that he draws and his music and his writing and his safaring. And I thought about other men who have these multi-talented portfolios and then write novels, and you kind of want the novel to be terrible.
Okay.
But they're not.
Right.
And what springs to mind particularly is Graham Norton. I don't know if you've read Graham Norton.
I haven't read his stuff. I mean, I know who he is, and I just assumed the books wouldn't be good.
The books are magnificent. Now, it is so wrong that a man that funny on TV and that successful can then write a novel that is just magnificent and completely different from his TV persona. It's not like I'm now going to exploit my TV persona to make a novel. It's completely different. They're lovely, gentle, Irishy, wonderful, family-driven novels, and he's becoming one of those writers that I will read as soon as he comes out. And the other writers in this list, Richard Osman, who I love on Pointless, and is now such a successful novelist, and quite a motivation for cozy mystery writers.
Yes.
And apparently now Tom Hanks has brought out a very well-received novel.
Yes, and he's had a collection of short stories out before, which I've also read. Brilliant isn't exactly the word, but cerebral and interesting and intellectual, I would say.
It's just not fair. Do you think if we decided to become movie stars, we'd be just as successful?
I don't know. Don't we also multitask? Aren't we raising brilliant children while writing? Is that not the same thing?
But we aren't becoming famous for any of it, Fiona. What are you reading this week?
Well, I actually wanted to talk about something that I've been watching, which is a series on BritBox called Happy Valley. And boy, has it gripped me. Someone recommended it. And the main character is this sergeant. She's not even a detective. She's in uniform in a kind of fairly rough town in a valley in West Yorkshire. And I just like her as a character because she's not a Mary Sue.
What's a Mary Sue, Fiona?
Okay. So a Mary Sue is, it has been identified as a trope in writing, particularly in young adult, in fantasy and science fiction, where there's a female protagonist who's just too perfect. You know, she's gorgeous. She never makes any mistakes. She's admirable. She always knows the right thing to do. She powers ahead and gets everything right. And it's a problematic term from a feminist point of view because there is no male equivalent of a Mary Sue. I mean, none of us object to the fact that Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible is also perfect and doesn't make any mistakes and doesn't have any flaws, you know. But for some reason, when a woman character is so highly competent, people start saying, "Ooh, Mary Sue, no, she can't be that good." And it is something to think about in creating your characters. Don't make them too perfect, but also in the right setting, a highly competent lead can work.
And it can be part of their character because I do feel, and maybe I'm sounding a bit defensive because I think I've written a Mary Sue, except I gave her faults. That was the whole point of the book. But there are those women who present as being, they got the memo. They know how life's done. They don't make mistakes. They manage the job and the children and the this and the that without any mistakes. They never drop a ball. They always look beautiful. There are those women. And I know that what's going on under the surface is probably not as perfect as what they're presenting. But maybe that's why it is. Maybe there is a phenomena of women presenting as perfect and hiding their faults, whereas men just maybe let us see their faults face on.
But why do women attract resentment for that? Why do we kind of hate the perfect woman and don't really, we admire the perfect man and we resent the perfect woman, even in fiction?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a big thing. And it's actually something I try to be so careful of, in my personal life, that when I meet one of those women, that the first instinct is, you're too perfect, I'm going to hate you. That I pause and I go, I'm going to get to know you.
Yes.
I think that's a really important thing, but it's definitely something, I think it's something though that leads us to a rich stream of writing. So a lovely thing to be aware of.
Yeah. Creating nuance in character. And a writer who really knows how to write nuanced characters is our guest today, Fred Khumalo. So we have Brad Pitt in the studio today. Welcome, Fred Khumalo. You know him from his books, Bitches Brew, Touch My Blood, Dancing the Death Drill, Talk of the Town, The Longest March, A Coat of Many Colors, and 2 Tons of Fun. And I know there's more coming from Fred in the near future. Fred is the winner of the European Literary Award, the Alan Paton Award, and the Nadine Gordimer Short Story Award. I won't even go into all his nominations because there are just too many. Welcome to the Hidden Lives of Writers, Fred.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, being interviewed by fellow writers who understand what this is all about. Thank you.
I want to start with Fiona. You introduced Fred as Brad Pitt, and that made perfect sense to me. But Fred, how did this thing that you known as the Brad Pitt of writers come about? Because I know why I think it's true, but how did it come about?
It came about, we were launching Sunyati's novel, The Gold Diggers, a couple of years ago in Rosebank, exclusive books. And this young woman who'd been reading my books came to me and said, finally I get to meet the Brad Pitt of literature. And I said, well, what do you mean? No, you are the Brad Pitt. So I said, it's not about looks. And she said, no, it's not about looks, but you are the Brad Pitt of South African writing. So I never got her to really unpack what she meant. But,
it's definitely stuck. I thought it was about the looks myself.
No. I think it's about clothes, because I love clothes. And so does Brad Pitt. Well, that's my assumption. So yeah, people use that on Facebook in reference to me. They say Brad Pitt and my wife just laughs about it. You're not that beautiful.
I thought it was the looks because, we recently interviewed James Hendry, who, when Fiona Googled him, the first question that Google filled in was, is James Hendry married? So it seems half the world is in love with James, but it's an open secret that I'm a bit in love with Fred. So I'm just putting it out there on the table so that everybody knows. And that I thought the Brad Pitt was all about that.
Well, Gail, I introduced Fred by mentioning Bitches Brew, and I believe that book had an influence on you when it came out.
So yes, Bitches Brew came out, I think, when I was very early in my writing career. I think I was trying to write.
Yes.
And it's one of the books that I was, oh my God, this is what a South African writer can write. This is what we can do as South Africans. And it's one of the books that actually led me here. I wanted to know, when you were writing it, did you feel like you were doing something different for the times, that you were breaking new ground? Because for me, I felt like this is just how it should be for South African writers.
No, I'm not one of those theoretically driven writers or writers who are driven by theory or what has happened before. I look for a medium or a voice that I feel appropriate to this story. Remember, this was my first published novel. Mm-hmm. I had written other things that I mistook for novels. So I experimented. You do recall that it's written in the form of letters. There's an academic
epistolary.
Yeah,
talking about this.
I discovered after the publication of the novel that it was an epistolary novel. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't study literature at university. I studied journalism and politics. Mm-hmm. So my literary style is influenced by what I have read and enjoyed. So I look up to a lot of, I try to emulate writers that I really enjoy. Walter Mosley, Stephen King, and others, because they're entertaining while dealing with really, really, really serious issues. So that was my approach with Bitches Brew. It's a love story, but I wanted it to be fun. Mm-hmm. I had to have fun with it myself as a writer, and hopefully that level, that sense of enjoyment would be transferred to the reader as well. So that I never thought I was breaking new ground by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, for me, It felt like it, and it was inspiring. And if you feel that my books should not be out there, it's your fault that they
are. I'm interested in the way you wrote in the character of Letty, your main female protagonist. You wrote in her voice, and you've returned through your career to writing in the voice of a woman. Is that something that you've ever hesitated to do? How do you occupy the mind of a woman?
Yeah, that was a challenge that I set myself there to say, how does a woman who has been so abused and taken for granted all her life, how does she perceive of the world that she inhabits, the relationships that she has with the man in her life and her own children? How does she navigate life? So I wanted that experience to be as visceral as possible. Hence my decision to get into her head, so to speak, and view the world from her perspective. So it's not reported speech. She said, no, she is saying, I feel like this. I observed this. Yeah, it was a challenge that I set myself, and I thought that was the best way to explore Letty's world.
Fiona, we've been so thrown by having Brad Pitt here. Maybe that's just me. We didn't start in the right place. We're supposed to start by asking Fred how his writing week was.
Okay, we'll ask the question,
Fred,
Gail.
how's your writing week been?
No, my writing week is... So I am working... I normally write every day. Mm-hmm. I set myself a quota of words every day.
We don't allow you to get away with saying that. What is the word quota?
1,500 every day.
That's ambitious.
But it doesn't mean everything I produce every day is publishable or even readable to the next person. It's just training the muscle. Some of the stuff that I produce could be related to a specific project that I would be working on, or something unrelated. I've discovered over the years that some of the things that I thought would have belonged to a novel that I would be working on at any given time doesn't really work for the novel. So I put it in a folder that I call fragments. Mm-hmm. So if the fragment doesn't really fit within the story, the novel that I'm writing at that particular moment, I put it in the fragments folder. Some of those fragments finally became short stories. Yeah. And I realized, no, it doesn't really fit within the story that I'm trying to tell. And then I repurpose it. I repurpose it. And it becomes a short story. Or it becomes a segment for another novel in the future. Yeah, there's no real science to it, but I try to write every day.
And have you succeeded this week?
Oh, this week I'm working on a non-fiction project.
Oh.
I've been commissioned by a think tank. We are writing political scenarios. That's a very different kind of writing. So I'm the head writer for the scenario planning thing. So that's what is keeping me busy now. So the creative writing has been put on hold for now. Yeah. Especially this week, because I have to deliver the next, scenario. I delivered my first scenario 2 weeks ago. I'm delivering the next scenario, next week. Next week I deliver. So that's what occupied me this week. So my creative writing, back burner.
I've got so many questions arising from what he said. Am I allowed to go down a bit of a process hole before I give you a chance?
Yes, go for it. Let's go.
The way you talk about writing, it sounds like you're not a linear, and we've recently been talking about this. It sounds like we both will start a book at the beginning and write to the end, and we don't jump around. From what you're saying, do you jump around? Do you start at the beginning and write to the end? How do you, when you're in a novel, how do you write it?
When I was starting out, I made many mistakes. One of them being, I just get inspired and start writing. I don't have a roadmap. I don't have an outline. That was a huge mistake because I wrote two things that I showed around to Chris van Wyk. You remember how funny he was?
Yes.
So I gave him this manuscript. He read it, and then he called a meeting, and we're sitting, and hey, Comrade Fred, beautiful English you have here, but Fred, there's no fucking story here.
I can hear him saying it.
And excellent advice.
Yeah. So I realized my major problem with that, I did not have a plan. So that's why the story was all over the place. Ultimately, there was no story. So what I do now, taking advice from the likes of Chris and other writers, Stephen King is one huge advocate of an outline. You have an outline. It can be as detailed as a chapter by chapter outline, or it can be a short 10-page summary of where the story begins and ends. So every time I start writing a novel, I have that kind of outline these days. It helps a lot. But now the writing itself is not always linear. I could be writing, first chapter, I'm setting the scene. And then as I'm thinking about the story, I know at some stage this character is going to go this way, but it's not necessarily the second chapter or third chapter. But I write it anyway. I'm going to polish it later when the other chapters have fallen into place. So the writing itself is never linear. I could start with the first chapter, and then I want to know what the final chapter could be. So I write a very rough ending to a book so that it anchors me. Yeah.
And writing like that, do you use a writing software or do you work in Word?
No, I don't have a software.
Because I believe it's easier when you write like that to use one of those Scrivener or Plotters, what I'm hearing about now, because it allows you to do very fancy things with your planning. But personally, I write in Word. So
no, I've never used any of the software packages. I hear about them. I don't even know how they work. Not yet.
Maybe we're too old for it.
Yeah.
So, Fred, your two books, The Longest March and Dancing the Death Drill, which have been incredibly well received, are both historical novels. Can you talk us through how you became aware of the incidents on which they are based and how you decided that this was a moment in history that you wanted to shine a light on and that you wanted to insert your characters into those moments in history?
The first one, Dancing the Death Drill, relates to the sinking of the SS Mandy during the First World War.
Yes.
As a kid growing up in KZN, the story of the Mandy is one of those stories that we grew up with, a story that grandpas and old people would tell in the oral tradition. But the details were very vague. The story it sounded to our ears as kids, it sounded like one of the folk tales that people would tell. I remember there was even a choral song, because I used to sing in choirs until matric. I was a very serious chorister. So there was a song about the SS Mandy as well, a Zulu choral song about the SS Mandy. We sang that.
I'm so tempted to ask you to sing.
No. So, as I'm saying, growing up, the story is there. You hear about it, but you don't really take it seriously. Fast forward to, I think it was 2009 or 8. I'm in France in my capacity as a journalist, at the invitation of the Foreign Ministry of France. So I'm with John Battersby, who was with the Independent at the time, and Chris Moore, who was with the Sowetan. And I was working for Rapport newspaper at the time. So we are in France, and at some stage, the guy who, our chaperone, drove us from Paris, took us to the train, and we took a train from Paris all the way to the coast. Get to the coast, a small town called Dieppe, and we get a hired car from this train station. We drive, And the guy drives us to a graveyard. So I'm thinking, that the French have got a very strange way of entertaining their guests. You drive all the way from Paris to the coast and you take us to the graveyard. Yeah, so we're laughing about it, the three of us here. So what the hell is happening here? Until we see tombstones with South African surnames, Mokoena, Vundla, and that's, okay, maybe the guy is up to something. And then he tells us, no, guys, I wanted to surprise you. So he says, no, are you guys familiar with the story of the SS Mandy? So I said, yes, I used to sing about it. And Chris Murray, who's from the Northwest, says, yes, there's even a street somewhere named after the sinking of the SS Mandy. But John Battersby didn't know, wasn't aware of the story. So the guy tells the story very briefly, and he says, these guys, these tombstones that you see, some of these guys were survivors of the SS Mandy. Others would have traveled because the guys who went down with the SS Mandy were just one of many battalions of men who went to serve in France. So he says some of the people that are buried here were comrades of those who were on the SS Mandy, but they came before the guys on the SS Mandy. So they died of natural causes. They're buried here. Others died through combat. They're buried here. So that's why the guy had decided to take us there. And then, I got excited. So I remember the story that our grandfathers used to tell. So it really happened. Mm-hmm. So I wrote a series of articles for my newspaper about this, and the level of interest from our readers, people writing letters to say, yes, my grandpa told us. These are Afrikaans speaking people. Remember, I'm writing for a Rapport at the time. Say, no, my grandpa was with the natives who were on the ship. Others, and it was a very interesting moment for me as a writer to get all those responses. And I felt, maybe there's a book here. And at the time I thought it would be a non-fiction book. But then I realized that would be very difficult because even the survivors, the people who came back from the war, the First World War, would be dead by now. Those who are still alive would be, they wouldn't
very
remember.
old.
Yeah, very old. They wouldn't remember anything. So writing, and I looked at the archives, the newspapers of the time covered the story of the sinking of the SS Mandy. But it was just the numbers, how many men died and so on. And even the names of the people who went down were not published. They only published, interestingly enough, they only published the names of the white officers who were there. The white officers who were there had also written letters to their families. So there was a bit of curating around the letters that were written by the officers who were on that particular boat and others around that same time. Now, the black soldiers, the black men who were on that ship were just numbers.
Right.
Yeah. So I felt, no, maybe I don't have a non-fiction book here. I have a novel. Mm-hmm. Now, taking this story into novel form liberates me, gives me the freedom to imagine, to just embellish things while sticking to the facts. Yes, I can't change the number of people who went down with the Mandy, but I can imagine how it was to have been on that ship as it was going down. So that's how I got to write the story of the SS Mandy.
That is a fabulous backstory. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And the longest march?
The longest march, now, that one I was only alerted to that story because I wasn't aware of these people. Okay, for the benefit of our listeners, the longest march is inspired by a story of 7,000 Zulu people, mainly Zulu men, who were working on the mines in Johannesburg just before the outbreak of the so-called Anglo-Boer War, now called the South African War, in 1899. So, these people were, as I say, they were originally from Zululand and Natal, as that part of the country was called back then. They were supposed to go back home just before the outbreak, because an alert had been sent. Please go home. And Zulus being Zulus, we are very obstinate and stubborn. I said, no, it's a war between you white people. So Singena, how do we get in there? No, just fight it out. We'll wait for you until when you're done, then we start working on the mines again.
Fair enough.
So they refused to go home. So, and then the mines were shut down. Now that their source of income has been shut down, there were riots. There were food riots in Johannesburg. So they started looting. So looting didn't start in 2021. So they start looting. There's rampage on the streets in Joburg, and now they're starving. They don't earn any money, and so it becomes clear to them, no, we have to go home. But now it's very late in the day, because the trains that would have transported them to their places of origin have now been commandeered by the army. So what do? They have to walk from Johannesburg to Natal, which is roughly 500 kilometers, depending on where you're going. Now they are faced with a challenge. If they walk as a group of 7,000 black men on the eve of the outbreak of war, they might be mistaken, because they would be passing through white-owned farms and white-controlled towns from here to Zululand and Natal. They might be mistaken for an enemy and shot. So, what do? They go to the white guy who recruited them to come here, James Marwick. He originally came from Richmond, which is in just outside Pietermaritzburg, KZN. So they go to him. They say, no, you brought us here. Take us home. So he was very smart. He thought very quickly, how do I solve this? So he wrote a series of letters to government authorities seeking passage through the towns, and wrote a series of letters to the magistrates of all the towns that they would be passing through, to say, when you see a group, this huge of 7,000 black people, we come in peace. Do not shoot. What you could do, in fact, is tell the farmers in your area to slaughter some beasts, and you sell meat to us, because we would have run out of our food supplies. So that is what happened. So they started walking. They left Johannesburg on the 7th of October and got to Ladysmith 10 days later. Imagine 7,000, mainly men and some women and children, with their belongings in scorching heat. Remember, it's October, it's hot, and there are intermittent rains as well. So they walked 10 days, and so I only heard about this story by chance. I'm driving from work. Jenny Cruz Williams still had a show on 702.
Yeah.
And she's interviewing an academic who is telling this story that I had never heard of. 7,000 black men walking from Johannesburg to KZN. So I'm listening. Wow, what a story. So after the show, I phoned Jenny. Okay, I would like to have that academic's number, the academic that you were interviewing. I would like to speak to her about that, because this academic had written, she's an academic, she had converted her PhD, which was on this march. She had converted it into a book, a non-fiction book. And I said, I would like to read that non-fiction book. There might be a story there. And yes, I spoke to the academic, and the book was out of print, but she very graciously did a photocopy of her book and sent it to me. I read it. It's a very short book, non-fiction. I said, there's a novel here. So that's what happened. Yeah, so I wrote a novel. Yeah.
Fred, you are such a natural storyteller that I find myself sitting here riveted, even though, even having read the books, you sit here riveted by the story. I want to ask you about, you've talked about, you study journalism and you work as a journalist still.
Yes.
How does one balance that? How do you balance, so you're using a writing energy in your day job and you're using a writing energy in, let's call it your side gig, although I think to call writing fiction a side gig for you is very disrespectful, but I don't know how else to word it. How does one balance having to produce all those words? Where do you find the energy? How do you do it? And in that, how did you come to writing fiction and not just journalism?
It's very, very, it's very challenging making the transition from journalism. Journalism, we are taught right from the from your first year of study, keep it simple. Yeah. And keep it as simple as possible, as possible. Short sentences, short words, don't be fancy and all that. Yeah. Now, fiction is opposite. You're trying to get into your characters' inner life, inner space, and so on. It's always a challenge for me to make that transition. And even in the technical side of writing itself, journalistic writing, I don't mean to be disrespectful to my craft. It can be very simplistic. Whereas when you are writing fiction, you want to be, what's the word? You want to go deeper into the story. You want to go beyond the surface or beyond what's on the surface. So this is the challenge that faces me every time I make the transition from my day-to-day job of simple writing to the other kind of writing. And sometimes I'm writing a chapter in a novel, and I think, oh, this is so journalistic. What are people going to say? Yeah. And so I have to keep redrafting. But having said that, what journalism has taught me is the discipline of writing. You don't wait for inspiration. You just write. You say to yourself, I'm going to write. You set yourself a quota, or whatever. Every writer has got their own approach to writing, how they keep themselves focused on the project at hand. So, what I always tell people, young writers asking for advice, but I'm not inspired. How can I write if I'm not inspired? So I tell them my experience. Before joining City Press, I used to have a very popular column at Sunday Times. It was a weekly column, and it was supposed to be funny. And so you have to deliver that every week. So I said to these kids, I couldn't go to my editor and say, Mondley or Ray or whoever was editor at the time, no, I'm not inspired this week. There's no column. I couldn't say that. I have to push myself to not only deliver, but also try and maintain the standard that I have set for myself and my readers. My readers expect the column to be funny. I'm a human being. I have my ups and downs and all that. And I get depressed. I get angry. I get challenges at home, blah, blah, blah. Have fights with the tax man. But I still have to be funny, So journalism taught me that discipline to say, just be inspired, even if you are not inspired. So I'm grateful for that discipline that I get from that space, and which now I use in this other space, the creative writing space. It doesn't always work, as I say. I can produce 1,500 words every day, but not publishable sometimes.
And how much does it hurt you to throw those words away?
As I said earlier, sometimes I used to throw them and forget about them. And I said, no, keep them. I think it was Stephen King in his writing memoir, on writing. I think I picked, that piece of advice from him that you don't throw anything away. You write it, and if it doesn't work for the project that you are busy with, keep it. You might find use for it later. And that has worked for me as well. Yeah.
Fred, several of your books have been converted for the stage. How involved have you been in that process? And even on taking it on the road, taking projects overseas as stage plays, have you been deeply involved in that?
No, with the stage adaptation to Touch My Blood, my autobiography, well, they invited me to join the rehearsals. They introduced me to the cast. They didn't have a written script. They said, this is how we see the story. So I sat through the rehearsals and they would ask, are we on the right track? So I would say, maybe change. My father didn't behave like that. He was like this and that kind of thing. So in a very advisory role. Yeah. So I was not really deeply involved. So that was Touch My Blood. And then with Dancing the Death Drill. So the Touch My Blood adaptation was done by James Ngobo, who at the time was with the Market Theatre. And then Dancing the Death Drill was done by a production company based in Cape Town. So they do musicals. That's their specialty. So they also bought the rights to the book, and then they said, when we are ready with rehearsals, would you like to come and join us and see what we do? So yeah, they invited me and I went there. There I was a bit more involved right from the beginning. I can't write music, but I would say maybe that kind of singing is more Xhosa, and these guys are Zulu. So yeah, and
you've got that whole choral background.
Yes. And the musical director is a good guy, Mandisi. He's good. And so I said, no. Yeah, the song is great, but it needs a Zulu inflection. You guys are doing it the Xhosa way, because obviously you guys are Xhosa, but in Zulu, and they were flexible, so they accommodated me there, and so yeah, I watched my words being turned into music that was very, very, very good for the ego, that I'm a very musical writer, you know.
Fred, you've touched on an interesting aspect that you're writing in English, but English is not your mother tongue. How frustrating is that for you? Or not at all? Is English your writing language and that's just how it's always been? And would you ever write in Zulu, straight to Zulu?
Yeah, I'm bilingual in my writing. I've published.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
I didn't realize this.
The reason, my very first job as a journalist was with a Zulu language newspaper. Although I was trained in journalism in English, I started writing in Zulu, which was a challenge. I speak Zulu as a first language, but writing and speaking are two different things. Yeah. So it was more challenging for me to write in my mother tongue than it was, because as I say, I got trained in journalism through the medium of English. So I became comfortable with the language, even though it's my second language. Now I had to make the transition of writing in my mother tongue, which was a challenge. Yeah. Some of the editors there would say, no, now you are thinking in English. This is a Zulu language newspaper. This is English. That you've written English in Zulu. No.
And Zulu is a difficult language. Grammatically, it's a difficult language. I know this from watching my children learn it. It maybe not to you. If you learn it as a second language, it's very complicated.
No, okay. It's simpler compared to English. We don't have past perfect tense in Zulu. We have past tense, future tense. Yeah, 3 tenses. That's it. All these funny things that we have in English are not there in Zulu. So that's why I think it's easier that way. Yeah. Okay, it's the vocabulary. The vocabulary is very, very vast in Zulu, and you can have. Yeah, we use a lot of euphemisms in Zulu when it comes to intimate things, like sex, like, if I'm speaking to a person who's my father's age or my mother's age, I can't say you. I speak to that person in the third person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As Sister Gail has said.
Okay. Yeah. So actually very like Afrikaans in that way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, I was trying to explain that I write in both languages. But the problem when I started writing short stories and novels, the publishing industry was not ready for black writers writing in their languages. There were no outlets for us.
Yeah, that's why think there still aren't enough outlets.
Yes. Because the argument from the publishing industry was, no, there's no market for that. Black people anyway buy books in English, which is nonsense. Because if you look at the newspaper industry, one of the biggest newspapers in this country for a long time was Isolezwe, which is a Zulu language daily paper. It has outstripped all other newspapers. The success of that has inspired other language groups to do the same. So there's Isolezwe in Xhosa now, and there are many new publications in my mother tongue in Zulu to say there is a market. But the industry, book publishing industry is taking too long to respond to that demand. However, things are opening up. So I have written 2 books in Zulu.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, a collection of short stories in Zulu for younger readers. And we translated Dancing the Death Drill into Zulu.
Mm-hmm. And did you do the translation?
No, I didn't. Okay. I hired a special guy, a real translator. Yeah. And I wrote a novel for younger people in Zulu. Yeah. It was a huge challenge for me to write a full length work in my mother tongue. It was really, 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 really challenging. Yeah.
But exciting, I imagine.
Exciting, yes, yeah. It was more difficult than writing in English, because I use the language every day. Yeah.
Yes.
In Zulu, I sit here in Joburg. We don't even speak proper Zulu in Joburg. So I struggle for words. I've forgotten the language because I don't use it every day. At home, my wife is Xhosa. So at home we speak a mixture of Zulu, Xhosa and English. So now I'm writing in Zulu and I can't find a word for something very simple, because it's not the word, it's not the language that I use every day. So, but gradually things are changing. The book publishing industry is opening up to our languages, and I see more and more younger writers deciding, no, let's just write in our languages. If they reject us, we self-publish. And I see a lot of that,
Exciting times.
I have a couple of questions about A Coat of Many Colors. Firstly, to do with the cover design of that. I believe your son was involved in that?
Yes.
Was that fun to work with your child in producing a book?
Oh, yeah. He's done 3 covers so far. He did the cover to my Zulu collection of short stories, Manze Kofi. He did the cover for that, which was really, really stunning. And he did the cover for the Zulu edition of Dancing the Death Drill. Yeah. And then for this one, Coat of Many Colors, which is published by Kwela Books. So I submitted the manuscript, which they liked. And so before they moved on to the cover, I said, no, may I ask that you guys engage my son's services as a cover designer? And so I said to him, send them all your stuff that you've done, because he does CD covers, book covers, magazines, and so on. And they liked it. So they said, no, go ahead and do a cover. So that's how it came about. Yeah.
It's a stunning cover. It's very striking.
Thank you.
And that story is very much set during the time of COVID. We have sanitizer, we have masks, we have lockdowns, we have misinformation, fear. Is the goat going to give us COVID? How exactly do you get this disease?
Yes.
Which took me right back to the early days when nobody really knew what on earth was happening.
Yes.
Did you write that during the time of COVID?
Yes. In the middle of COVID. Yeah, I wrote
because
that, yeah.
so many authors were reluctant to touch it. We were living through it, but many authors were, I'll write about anything except this awful thing that's happening to us right now. Was it a challenge?
Yeah, that's why in the story itself, everything is open-ended. People are still asking questions. Can I get COVID from a goat? Can I get COVID from drinking, from sharing a cup with the next person? So I get my characters to ask those questions. I don't want to be definitive, because at the time I didn't know. No one knew. So that's why it's like open-ended like that.
And did you find it harder to write during COVID or easier? I asked because I wrote a lot during COVID, but I know the general experience was that a lot of writers stopped writing during COVID.
Yeah, those were paralyzed by the experience.
No, I wrote a lot. How different was...
Was it not different for you, perhaps?
I think it was normal.
Okay.
Yeah, the output was almost the same. I didn't increase the number of words that I produced every day, or did I decrease them? I don't remember. I think it was the same.
Perhaps because you are such a disciplined writer, you didn't...
But of course I was scared, like everyone else I was scared. I remember Melinda asked us to write. Yeah, I wrote a chapter to that lockdown book that she put together. Responding to COVID as well. How what am I seeing on the ground? How is it affecting me? And and something that happened during COVID. So now everyone is in lockdown. I'm sitting at home. I've got my grandkids in Devon. We normally speak. So now they are at home. Their mother, my daughter, is just irritated with them. They are all over and, no, speak to your grandpa. So we'd video call each other and tell them stories, because I'm sitting at home. They're sitting at home. So that way I'm keeping them away from their mother. So I tell them stories and I start reading them stuff, and then an idea occurred to me. I'm reading them a short story almost every day. How if I take this and read to a bigger group?
Yes.
So that's what happened.
I remember this.
Yes,
Yeah.
I remember too.
So I took the whole thing to Facebook Live. So every weekday at 12 noon, I would invite people with kids to allow their kids to join me. And I read from different children's books in Zulu and English and so on. So that's what happened during lockdown. Yeah.
That's a lovely COVID experience.
Yeah.
In your book, 2 Tons of Fun, you inhabit the character of this, I think she's 14 years old, Lerato, and you write very much from inside her character. And also it's set in Alexandra Township, but you now live in the suburbs. How have you managed to stay current with what township life is like now, and also what the youth culture in the township is like now? Because it's not the same as when we were kids, for example.
Yeah. Youth culture evolves every day. So, 2 Tons of Fun, which is a coming of age story involving Lerato, who is from Alex. That story was kind of inspired by my daughter, who at that time was in St. Mary's. She is a black girl going to this school, private school, and there were some kids in that school who were bursary kids, so there was a lot of classism. Oh, you're a bursary kid. So they used to make fun of them and that kind of thing. So my daughter is telling me this. Man, it's nasty what happens there. So I'm listening to these stories and later I realized, no, what if I tell a story, about this disjuncture between a kid who comes from Alex, but who's smart enough to get into a private school such as St. Mary's or whichever, and the baggage she brings into that school and what she learns from the others who are from the other experience. Yeah, I thought about that. Initially, the story was going to be Lerato goes to St. Mary's or some other private school, unnamed, and she meets and befriends a white kid from the suburbs at that school, and they become friends and they share experiences. I thought, no man, it sounds a little bit contrived and predictable. So I got Lerato to stay in Alex and have a black kid, middle class. Her mother is a lecturer at university, but they don't live in the suburbs. For whatever it is they're running away from, they leave the suburbs to come and hide in Alex. So they live in Alex, and but they are very different from the people from Alex. So
they're known as the sort of fake white family.
Yes, they are white people from number 87. Yeah. So I wanted to explore classism within the black community because it is there. It is there. Well, it's always been there. Even when I was growing up, there were sections of our township which were reserved or inhabited by well-to-do people, teachers, your nurses, your magistrates, people who were educated, professionals. Mm-hmm. So they had their own section. And their kids didn't go to local schools. They went to boarding school.
Right.
So there were all those tensions between us and them. And so I thought, let me do that in Alex, contemporary Alex as it is now. So that's how the book was conceived. Lerato is working class, broken family, dysfunctional family. The mother is a shoplifter, and she befriends this young lady who is new in Alex, but is trying to belong because her mother wants to belong. And so that's looking at class.
Fred, that leads to my next question. We've spoken with a lot of black women writers about the pressure to represent a whole group of people in your writing. And for black women writers, it seems to sometimes be an issue. I think most of them fight against it, but an expectation that when they come to the page, they come with an agenda, and whether it's an educational agenda but they are writing on behalf of a whole group of people.
Oh, yes.
Do you feel that?
No, I get that a lot. For example, one of the reviewers, commenting on 2 Tons of Fun, he slated the book. He says, why is this guy telling us about what we already know? We know these things happen. Explore more pressing political issues that are faced. You don't defend yourself from book reviewers. So there are many expectations. that are out there. But as a creative person, if you were to write with that in mind, then you won't be creative. You just write what you feel comfortable with, what you believe is a story that you can tell with all honesty and beauty and so on. Yes, the expectations will always be there. This guy says, you can see Fred lives in the suburbs. He comes across as he's like looking down upon us in the townships and blah, 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 blah. It was hurting. Yeah, it was hurtful. But I mean, this life that we've chosen for ourselves will not please everyone. The things that we produce will not please everyone.
Related to that is, we spoke particularly with Sunyati about this, the perception that a black writer is going to be a literary writer. That there's almost not permission granted to just be a storyteller, that, you get storytellers and you get literary writers and occasionally it comes together. And when I listen to you, you are a storyteller. Do you see yourself as a storyteller or a literary writer? Because you definitely get a lot of the literary accolades.
I think I'm a storyteller. I'm a storyteller. I don't have the tools of a literary writer because I wasn't trained like that. I try to emulate the writers that I enjoy. The writers that just do it for me. Like I said earlier, Walter Mosley, Stephen King, Elmore Leonard, those kind of entertaining writers. Yes, they explore very serious issues. Walter Mosley is into race. Yes, but he does it so elegantly. Yeah. And so I think I'm a storyteller. Yeah.
You are a very prolific writer. We get a book from you these days basically once a year. Have you ever had a publisher say that you are producing too fast? Because I have had that. I've had publishers say to me, the world doesn't need 2 books by Fiona Snyckers every year. You've got to slow it down. We're not prepared. We're not prepared to publish you at this level of output. Or are they always happy for another Fred Khumalo novel?
One year I published 4 books.
Wow.
From different publishing houses. One of the publishing houses was not happy at all.
Okay.
Because they felt the other books are going to overshadow the book. Yeah. And so yes, there is that. Slow down, Fred. Slow down a bit, yeah. And we know from the likes of Stephen King as well, they were told back then when he started out, no. The market is saturated, which is why he wrote other books under a pseudonym.
Yes. Richard Bachman or whatever it was.
Richard Bachman, yeah. So there is that from the publishing industry that it's too much. But stories, there's so many stories,
This is so interesting to me because one of my writing projects is a joint writing project with Kate Sidley writing as Katie Gail, and we're on a digital platform.
Yes.
And as many books as we can write, they will publish.
Wow.
So it's a very different form of writing. We write in a genre, and the readers of genres are greedy for their genre.
Oh, yes.
They want to read 10, the fantasy. They want to read 10 fantasies in a row. They want to, and cozy crime. They want to, which is what we write. They want to read 10 cozy crimes in a row. So we feel a bit bad that we only produce 2 a year. So it's interesting how there's a change in these different publishing mediums.
Now that you bring the issue of genre, yes, because I read a lot of crime. Yeah. Lee Child. I can't wait for the next one. Walter Mosley as well. And, so I see that with genre writing, it's kind of, the writer is actually forgiven for producing more than 1 book a year and so on.
I'm just putting it to you two, both very prolific writers, that the digital platforms love a prolific writer. Just putting it out there.
Wow. Thank you.
So what can we expect from you next? Is the next one in the barrel, loaded, ready to go?
I'm busy with the nonfiction project that I mentioned earlier. But it came at a time when I was in the middle of writing an autobiography, ghostwriting an autobiography of Sello Kanxube, the famous actor.
Right.
He was in Generations, he was in The Whale Caller, He's one of the biggest actors in the country at the moment. Mm-hmm. So he commissioned me to write his autobiography. So that one I'm writing for Kwela Books.
Right.
Yeah. So that is the one that is likely to come out later this year or early next year.
Okay.
So that's the one. And then next year there might be a crime novel. Because I'm trying,
exciting.
I'm getting into the genre space, yeah. Yeah.
And could you see that as the start of a series, or is that a standalone?
No, it's a series. It's going to be a series. Ooh, I'm planning it as a series. Yes.
Fiona, am I allowed to ask the question that we ask at the end?
Yeah, I
don't think I've ever been allowed to ask it. Fred, we always like to know what people are reading, what is feeding into your creative energy, what are you enjoying reading, what do you want to recommend? What's happening for you in your reading life?
What am I reading? I'm rereading. I can't remember why I'm rereading Beloved. Yeah, Toni Morrison's Beloved. Yeah, but I'm rereading that in conjunction with the stuff that relates to my nonfiction project. Yeah, there's a lot of material that I'm reading that relates to what the country could be in the next 10 to 20 years. It's very academic research into crime trends, into protest trends. So I'm reading that in conjunction with Beloved.
And are you getting more out of it on a reread?
Yes, surprisingly enough. I'm saying, why didn't I see this in my previous reading? Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, Fred, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We want everyone to check out your books. Most of them, I think, are still in print. Catch the stage play. I believe it's been to London.
Yes, it was Southampton. From Southampton, it went to London. From London, I first saw it in Norway.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah. And from Norway, it moved to Brisbane, Australia.
Wow.
And then COVID happened, and then they stopped.
Right.
Yeah. So now that things are opening up, they want to bring it back. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we hope everyone checks it out if it comes to a theatre near them. And thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Nice. Thank you.
Gail, I was spellbound by that. Fred is such a natural storyteller.
He is. I actually felt like I could just sit all day asking him to tell stories. I know how his grandchildren must have felt during COVID.
Exactly.
What did you take out of it, Fiona?
I was interested in what he had to say about deleting and rewriting. I think he said something very interesting, and I don't know if it did come from Stephen King. It might have. I haven't read On Writing in a while. But this idea that if you've decided not to use something, you don't have to delete it permanently. You can put it in a fragments folder and maybe use it again in the future. It's not something I have tried to do, but it certainly is tempting. I've always thought in the past that anything that should be deleted should just disappear from the face of the earth forever.
Kill your darling dead.
Yes, make sure it's dead and buried and never to be resurrected. But maybe there is some material that, even if it doesn't belong in this particular project, perhaps belongs somewhere else.
Are you a big deleter?
You know, I used to be. My first few books, I would kind of do that vomited out first draft, and then working on the second draft was hard. I would delete pages of writing. I would do massive rewrites. I would look at it and cringe because it was such nonsense. And it was time consuming. That really took a long time to get to a kind of usable second draft out of the rubbishy first draft. And then I heard an interview with the author J.A. Huss, who is digital only. She writes erotic romance, I think. But she's a very practical and pragmatic person. And she has done a kind of series of podcasts on how to write. And she talks about, her daily output is very impressive. It's thousands of words. And she says, once I've written those words, I'm not deleting them. So she is writing something that as it goes on the page for the first time, is really good enough to stand scrutiny. And she might tweak things a bit and then it goes through an editor. But she's more experienced and she's focused now on writing a better first draft that can stand on its own. And that's something I've also been doing, I think, with experience. Be more thoughtful about what you're putting down on the page, because it really is an incredible schlep to do a massive rewrite.
Absolutely. And, I don't know if we've talked about before that I think my superpower is that I'm lazy. And for me, for the lazy me, the idea of having to throw words away and rewrite sections, it really is not a very attractive idea to me.
And what did you take from Fred?
Well, that's the irony. The thing that I've took from Fred and the thing that I want to talk about is actually the exact opposite of that. Don't throw away things. And it's very much about throwing away things. Fred said that before he wrote Bitches Brew, he wrote a few things that he mistook for novels.
Yes.
And this is something I feel quite strongly about. I've talked before about having realistic expectations. And part of that for me is that often your first book is going to be a practice exercise. And my mother used to say that the first child is like the first pancake and should be thrown away. A bit of an irony, because I was her only child, she was an only child, and my father was an oldest child. So we all would have been thrown away like the first pancake. But I think the thing that comes out of it is often you have a learning experience before you do your best work. And
like an apprenticeship.
Absolutely. And my first book certainly was not publishable. It was something I mistook for a novel, as Fred would have said. And I think often what happens with new writers who don't carry on is they get so stuck on that first crappy book. And instead of moving on and writing another book, they keep trying to fix that first one. Don't. Put it aside, write your next book. That might be the great book.
And very often authors start off, their first novel is kind of autobiographical. So they've literally put themselves into that and are very reluctant to let go of it. And actually the second thing that you're going to do is going to be so much better.
Yeah, I think often second books are where you find your pace, you find your voice, you find what you really want to be writing about. I definitely can separate between my first book, Marriage Vows, and my second book, Whatever Happened to the Carley Twins. They are different books, and then from there it followed a more logical progression.
Yes, and I would hate to tell you how many books I actually wrote before I came to the one that was publishable, but it was certainly more than 3 or 4. So my apprenticeship lasted quite a long time, and I'll own it. I'm not ashamed of that. It was a learning experience. I needed to go through it. Don't be too precious about your very first output. It might not be the thing that's going to win you fame and fortune.
I think that's the best piece of advice to end on. Don't be too precious. Full stop.
So if our readers are inspired by what Fred said today, please let us know. We're on social media, on Twitter and Instagram. If anything we've been talking about has resonated with you, join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you.
You've been listening to another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.